Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD bodybuilder, back with another video. Today we're going to be talking all about calisthenics. Are they good for muscle growth, and what are the pros and cons of calisthenics versus weight training? Calisthenics are compound movements that move your body through space. Common examples would include push-ups, dips, chin-ups, muscle-ups, squats, and a lot of ab exercises. They are often done as body weight only exercises, but weight can be added to some of them. Quick outline for today, we're going to be talking all about the use of calisthenics for muscle growth in comparison to traditional weight training. We'll start off by talking about the pros of calisthenics for muscle growth, then move on to the cons, and lastly, we'll put everything together to give you some recommendations on whether you should be using calisthenics for bodybuilding. If you've been enjoying my content, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. Alright, let's start by talking about the pros of calisthenics for muscle growth. The first pro is that they're very convenient and you need no equipment or minimal equipment. A lot of people get into calisthenics because they don't have any equipment or they may not have access to a gym. This is especially applicable for people training at home, but some people just can't afford a gym or don't have one nearby. Now, the next advantage is that calisthenics are mainly compound movements and they're very efficient for beginners. Most movements that move your body through space involve multiple joints. And this means involving a lot of muscle mass and multiple muscle groups. This is really good for beginners who may not have a strong understanding of training mechanics because it will ensure that they're getting a lot of stimulus for their body overall. A lot of beginners who start off in the gym make the mistake of only using isolation work. Especially if you're only training a few days a week, you really want to be maximizing the amount of muscle mass you engage with every exercise. So calisthenics are a good way to make sure people focus on using compound movements. The other advantage of calisthenics is that they're very functional movements, which makes them good for athleticism and basic movement pattern training. There are 6 main movement patterns used in bodybuilding: horizontal push, vertical pull, horizontal pull, squat, and hip hinge. And calisthenics can be a good introduction to these basic movement patterns. Now, the last pro of calisthenics is that some of them can be weighted, and there are multiple variations that you can do for each exercise that will make them harder so you can implement progressive overload. Progressive overload is the most important factor in muscle growth, so you want to make sure that you're training in a way that allows for it. Alright, now that we've talked about the advantages of calisthenics, let's talk about the disadvantages. The first con of calisthenics is that they're difficult to overload, and there are 2 main problems with overload that come up with calisthenics. The first one is that there's a maximum resistance limit. With most calisthenics movements, especially bodyweight training, your main mechanism for progressive overload is to add reps. Now, there is research to say that people can grow muscle well across a variety of rep ranges. As long as you push close enough to failure within about 4 reps in reserve, you're going to build muscle well as long as you're using more than 30% of your 1RM in terms of resistance. That works out to about 1 to 30 reps, which is a really wide range. So you can build muscle well with bodyweight exercises, as long as you're training hard within that 30 rep range. But what happens when things get too easy? Once you push to the higher end of that rep range, you can push to a more difficult variation. Common variations of bodyweight exercises would be push-ups to clapping push-ups to one-arm push-ups, or squats to jump squats to pistol squats. However, the issue that still comes up with this is that you can't precisely overload. The power of weight training is that you can add weight in small increments, like 5 pounds at a time. And this allows you to control your rep ranges and progressively overload in a very structured way. As you get stronger, jumping from one variation of calisthenics to another one is a huge jump in resistance. And a lot of people will have trouble with that. For example, going to one-arm chin-ups, one-arm pull-ups, or pistol squats is a pretty difficult endeavor, and it's hard to bridge the gap of resistance along the way. As a side note, I did mention that you can use plyometric type calisthenic movements, for example, clapping push-ups or jump squats. However, these aren't going to be ideal for muscle growth overall. They are better than nothing because you're increasing the amount of resistance, and you are applying more force. However, you're applying that force over a small amount of time. A lot of people will call this time under tension, but basically, to produce the mechanical tension that we need for muscle growth, you need to apply force over time. And you want to think about multiplying that force over time to get the overall work that you're applying throughout the session. So whenever you're progressively overloading, you want to be thinking about how you can microload the exercise. Now, note that some calisthenic movements lend themselves well to progressive overload, like weighted chin-ups or weighted dips. Now, the next con of calisthenics is that it's hard to train legs. Namely, it's hard to get heavy hip hinge movements in just using your body weight. The last disadvantage of calisthenics is that the resistance changes with your body weight. If you're doing bodyweight chin-ups, for example, the weight you're lifting is your body weight. And for example, if you're losing weight, the resistance you're moving is actually going down. So if your weight is fluctuating, you'll want to keep this in mind. Alright, now that we've talked about the pros and cons of calisthenics for muscle growth, let's put everything together to give you some recommendations. First recommendation is that it's okay to use calisthenics if you're an absolute beginner and you don't have equipment or a gym. As long as you're getting to within 4 reps of failure in the 1 to 30 rep range, you're going to be solid for muscle growth. And if you're really challenged in this rep range, then calisthenics are great exercises for muscle growth. However, I do recommend that you move to weight training or get to using a gym as soon as possible. And there are a couple of reasons for this. First off, the gym will allow you to progress in a very structured way, and you always want to aim to be progressively overloading in small increments. The other thing is, even say if you're getting challenged doing maybe sets of 20 to 30 on bodyweight exercises, you're not going to be getting an ideal stimulus. The evidence for this isn't that strong at this point, but I currently recommend having a variety of rep ranges in your training. This typically includes training in lower rep ranges like less than 6 to 8, in moderate rep ranges like 6 to 12, and in higher rep ranges like 12 to 20 reps. The idea here is that you want to target both your fast and slow twitch muscle fibers. Fast twitch muscle fibers tend to respond better to heavier weight training, and slow twitch fibers respond better to higher rep, lower weight training. I do recommend focusing on the 6 to 12 rep range for practical reasons, and having the remaining 1/3 of your training lying outside that rep range. The power of weight training is you can really control your different rep ranges, so it's easy to get that variety. Now my next recommendation is to use weighted variations of calisthenics. Calisthenic movements are really good movement patterns, and a couple of them lend themselves well to progressive overload, namely weighted chin-ups and weighted dips. These are probably my favorite 2 calisthenic movements for bodybuilding. This is because you can overload them precisely and heavily to get you that good bodybuilding stimulus. The best way to overload these is to use a dips belt to hang weight plates. This way you can easily load these movements in 2.5 increments, and you can make them really heavy as you get stronger. In fact, I recommend that everyone try these 2 movements at some point. Now my last point here is that you can use bodyweight movements as finishers. There are successful bodybuilders who will use bodyweight calisthenics as drop sets or as a finisher exercise at the end of their workout. This way, even though they're way too strong to be using bodyweight exercises alone, they're using them later on when they're fatigued, and thus these exercises are still a challenge. I have to say that I am somewhat against this because I think you're better off using weights, which will allow you to more precisely control the amount of resistance you're using. Even if you're doing drop sets, it's helpful to keep track of how much weight you're using for how many reps. This will make sure that you know that you're progressively overloading over time. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like the video and leave me a comment below. In particular, do you use calisthenic movements? What are your favorites, and do you add weight? Let me know. If you're looking for a science-based workout program, check out one of my full workout programs here, where I walk you through a full program designed for hypertrophy. If you've been getting value from my content, make sure you subscribe and share the channel with your fitness friends so they can benefit from it too. See you next time.